I'm your host, Christene Marie. I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas. I know that technically it's 2 days after Christmas, but I'm still very much in Christmas mode. I just spent the most of today at my sister's house. We were prepping for family coming into town. My two brothers are flying in tomorrow, and they're bringing their girls and wives, and it's just going to be a full house here in the next, I guess, 24 hours. And then we're going to be spending Christmas on Monday as a family, and then we'll be together through New Year's. And so I've got five brothers and sisters, and we've got now five nieces and nephews. So, and then obviously we've got people who are married. And so I think are we at a total of, I think we're at a total of 15 now. Maybe it might be 16. So it's going to be crazy. And I'm so excited. My parents and my two younger sisters and I, all three of us single girls, and my parents spent Christmas Day together, and it was just so much fun and so peaceful and lots of play. And so I know it will not probably be peaceful whatsoever next week, but that's okay. And I'm just kind of in that festive mood still. So I hope you all had a wonderful Christmas and just really got to enjoy time with your family. I have also, in addition to being festive, I've also been in honestly a pretty reflective uh, stage over the last week. I held a 1 day retreat for myself last Saturday, so a week ago, and I just really dove in. I actually used a friend of mine, her template and framework for what she calls it 1 year later. So, questions she's asking herself today to reflect on the previous year, and then also setting the stage for the upcoming year. And we're going to be talking a little bit more over the next couple of days how to prepare ourselves leading into and up to 2026. I'm hosting a couple retreats over the next month or two, just really getting us in alignment for 2026. It's so important that we are ready, that we're prepared, that we've taken the time and taken stock to effectively prepare ourselves and prepare our mind, our soul, our spirit, so that we're ready to enter the year strong and enter it well. So today we're going to be talking about that specifically as we look back on 2025 and also look ahead. I really want to dive into this question of what are you doing that's hard? And frankly, I've had to ask myself that question because for the majority of my life, I really avoided doing hard things. Distinctly remember, I think I was 16 or 17, and I got the SAT sign up in the mail, and I like hid it from my parents. I think I put it on top of the refrigerator, and I never had to take the SATs. And because I was scared, I was like, I might do bad in math because wasn't good at math. And so I just had this aversion to doing hard things for most of my life. And I kind of got away with it. Um, and over the years, I started a business when I was 26. And actually, when I was 12, I started a camp for kids. And it was very successful. I made $1,000 in a week at 12 years old, and continued to do that for every summer after that. But it's funny. It's like hard compared to who? And you and I are the only ones who can answer that question. Are we actually really stretching ourselves? Because what might be hard for us might not be hard for somebody else. And what might be hard for somebody else may actually not be what's hard for you and me. And so, if we want to grow, if we want to stretch ourselves, if we want to go beyond, our own limits, our own limitations that either somebody else has placed for us or we have placed on ourselves, are we actually being intentional to know what our limitations are and then also identify, well, what even are our real goals? I was talking in a mastermind a couple weeks ago when we were doing a live knowing workshop, and I encouraged folks to consider every single core focus area of our lives: financially, physically, professionally, spiritually, relationally, every single area of our life. And then what's the target? What do we want in each one of these areas? And so everybody wrote down what they want. And, okay, what's next question is, what do you need to do to get to that next level and get to that place where you can actualize what you want? But then, after they had taken effectively an audit of themselves in relation to this ideal in every single category of their life, I then asked them to go back and review the ideal based on whether it was truly theirs or was it someone else's ideal? Was it their parents' ideal, their partner's, society's ideal? For so many of us, we actually want something based on other people saying that we should want it and that we should have it. And so that question extends, what do I actually truly want in every area? What do I actually want my business to look like? What do I want my work-life balance to look like? I really love working. And so even if I had all the money in the world, I would still want to apply myself and hopefully make an impact. But that also, that's another thing too. I actually want to make an impact, not just tons of money. So when I'm thinking about return on my investment, it's not just dollars in the bank. It's lives being touched or people experiencing healing, people experiencing love, those things to me that I really value, that I want other people to experience as a result of interacting with me. What do I actually want in that regard? Because it's so easy to chase the dollar sign. But is that really what I want? Or am I just chasing the same benchmark that everyone else has told me to pursue? Um, hey, everyone, I just wanted to take a quick moment to acknowledge the comments here. I know sometimes it takes me a few minutes to check in here. But thank you so much for joining us today, Uncle John. Thanks for coming on, Lender Jr. I don't know if I said that right, but good to see you guys. I I love what you actually said here. The truth you said, "Stay a lone wolf and you'll be extremely happy." And Christian, you said, "You're not content, you're searching." There's something around, isn't this an interesting point? This is where, okay, we're gonna get a little existential here for a second, so bear with me. Is the goal contentment? Do we want to pursue contentment? Is that ultimately what we want in a certain area? Is it impact? Is it peace? One of my sisters really wants peace in her life. Another one of my sisters really wants to be a heart surgeon. So that they're going to have to take very different roads to get to those two places. And there's something, this is part of the question for you and me to consider. There's a difference between what we do and who we are in terms of our being. It's like, what's the internal state? What do I want the internal life to look like, feel like? And then what do I want my actions to look like? And so this adds a whole other layer when it comes to these categories of our life, when we're identifying, okay, these are the benchmarks, these are what we're pursuing. Guys, man, this is so important, and I'm so grateful you brought this up here because you're so right. Man, if we're just constantly searching and constantly looking externally and looking out there to find contentment and to find our source of meaning, we're constantly going to feel dissatisfied. We're not ever going to feel fulfilled. And fulfilled does not mean that we roll over and play dead and sit on our laurels and we're done. But what it does mean is that in like our inner world, our inner life is rich. It's deeply satiated and deeply peaceful and deeply joyful, the kind that's not going to be knocked over when something inconvenient happens. It's not like you've got unstable emotions. And this is where it's really interesting, the integration of the emotional intelligence with intellectual intelligence. We need to be cultivating both our inner world and our outer world, our external actions and what we do, doing hard things and really pushing ourselves to grow while also really paying attention to the inner life that we want to cultivate. And so I'm so grateful that you brought that up because the goal is not to be chasing something external, but really and I actually love this analogy. It's led from within. It's almost like imagine my acting teacher when I was in high school, Kathy Mays. Shout out to Kathy. She's wonderful. She said, what you want to do is on stage, you want to have such a commanding presence and you want to roll your shoulders back and pretend like you've got a string attached to your sternum, like the heart of your chest, and it's pulling you forward. So it's like you're literally being propelled and pulled forward from this passion inside of you. There's this beautiful quote that says, there's nothing as beautiful as a human soul set on fire. Man, y'all, if we can find what we're passionate about, what we love, what we like earnestly want to do, why are we here? Why are we created? What makes you different from me? How do we have these different beautiful goals? How can we come together and, benefit each other? But ultimately, what is my responsibility? why am I here? And I actually need to go inside and look up and look in and say, all right, God, why am I here? We talked about the habits of Christ over the last couple of days leading up to Christmas. And the chief habit of Christ, Jesus manifest of God, and our example of who we get to be, because God is alive in every single one of us. So the power that you and I, every single person has and can tap into. And I think of it as like turning on a light switch. It's like, okay, turning on my intellectual intelligence, turning on my emotional intelligence, turning on my spiritual intelligence, turning on God's power in me. And I need to know how to do that, right? It takes time and it takes practice. But once we learn how to do that, man, there's so much power and so much passion waiting to, it's like the striking of ironing, sharpening iron, when the power and the passion come together and we find it. And it's like, oh my gosh, that's it. I've got power to back me up, to initiate the internal life and the inner spark, but then the external manifestation of that informs everything we do. But and I want to just take a quick note, to just check in here on the chat, because I really, really appreciated what you said, Christian. I think that that was so, so, so important. Um, Danny, you just said, I have goals and dreams, but I feel so overwhelmed sometimes, even knowing where to start. Do you have any tips? Oh my gosh, I am so grateful that you said that, because I feel so similar. I'm actually gonna just share what my friend created, because I went through this exercise last week and it was so helpful. She had us look back over the last year. So reflecting, and please, I really recommend you do this first. Set aside time on your calendar. Block off as much time as you can. I like 3 to 4 hours, because it's easy. It's so easy to be distracted by the phone that it takes me a good hour to really like get into a groove. And if I've only set aside an hour or two, right when I hit that hour mark, I'm just starting to get into a groove, but then I'm like, oh, I'm almost done. I've only got 60 minutes left. So ideally set aside 3 to 4 hours, more if you can, and reflect on the year and ask yourself, when did I feel most alive? When was I most healthy? What were the boundaries that I set up around me? And boundaries doesn't necessarily mean that it's with other people. It's like boundaries for myself. I need to be going to bed at 9 o'clock so I can wake up early and have my morning routine, because that time is sacred. It is so important that I honor that, because that's my time. And of course, it is so easy for me to give to everybody else and not to myself. And I think almost every single human being has that problem to an extent. And so this whole question of, okay, well, I've got these big goals and big dreams. Where do I start? Start with taking stock and an audit of what has been working. When were the times that you were most successful? And when I look back over the last 2 years, the most successful I was when I was waking up at 4 a.m. For about 4 or 5 months. I was waking up at 4 a.m. every day. I did the same thing every single morning. I wasn't traveling. So it's like, what was I doing and what was I not doing? Because once we start identifying, it's like, oh, I started doing this. Well, one of the things I started doing after I was kind of really, really doing well and really performing to the potential that I know I can, right? It's me against me. It's you against you. We're not comparing ourselves to other people. This question of, am I doing hard things? Only you and I can answer that. And so this conversation tonight is you and me looking in the mirror for ourselves and answering, okay, so if I really want to identify, when have I been most alive, most aligned? And I'll run these exercises with different folks that I'm working with, whether it's founders or folks who have exited from their business and they're like, what do I do now? There's a lot of people that are just like you and me asking these very same questions, who are very, very successful. And that's really encouraging for us. It's the same human plight. We all have 24 hours in the day, and it's like, how do I spend this time? So take the audit of what has worked in the past. What did we start doing that got us out of alignment? And what did we stop doing that moved us out of alignment? When I say alignment, I mean we have such clarity over our ideal. Who do we want to be? Who was I created to be? What was I created to do? Under the hierarchy of God. So it's God at the top of the pyramid, then our own ideal, and then underneath those, we bring our behaviors, our beliefs, our mindsets, our actions into alignment where, man, if my value and my ideal is that I am somebody who is emotionally intelligent, but then I start acting out of alignment, what that means is I'm probably starting to get angry and I don't know what's going on and I'm actually literally having my emotions. I think of it at like, who's the captain of the ship? Who's at the helm? Is it me? My ideal under God, my, the true self, let's say, or is it my my fearful part of me, the little Christine that got hurt at 7 years old and she's acting out right now? Or is it my true self that I know that I can be, that's possible? Like that's kind of an interesting concept of, and I don't want to go too far off course here. So much of knowing ourselves is bringing those pieces, those parts of us that have been hurt in the past, bringing them into like the caring folds of our true selves that God created and who we really are as we were made to be. So it's coming to know who that person is and then knowing how to love on the other parts of us that need tender loving care. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, and it talks about how our physical body remembers the traumas we've been through. Even if they're little, I think of it as little T traumas, like, you were bullied at school, or you were sitting there watching your parents fight, or maybe you were slapped, or maybe you were told, "Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about." In that moment, we have a narrative solidified in our mind and in our body around who we are and how to engage with the world. Well, now, older you and me, us as adults, once we really kind of almost like remember, oh, yeah, like who I was made to be before that little moment of trauma happened. Okay, I know that I am made to be loving. I know that I can actually take care of that little kid in me and tend to it rather than that little kid being the one at the helm and in the driver's seat. So when we think about, man, all these goals and dreams, and we can feel so overwhelmed, I think the real question here is, well, who's the one at the wheel? Are we at the wheel? The one where we've got the passion and the power working together, where we're so crystal clear on who we were made to be and what we're made to do, because then it's okay, well, then what's the one thing? So so I did the audit of 2025. When was I feeling most alive? What did I do that was really putting me on the right path? What did I stop doing that moved me off the right path? What did I start doing that moved me off of the right path? And so, okay, let me eliminate everything. Let me just eliminate excess as I look towards 2026. So, what I've identified is one thing. What's my one thing that I'm going to be doing for this upcoming year? And the main thing that I'm going to be doing, Danny, is my goal and my word for this year is predictability. I want to be so predictable with the emails that I send out, with what time I'm going to change the cadence of the knowing show so that every day I'm going live at the exact same time. Because honestly, it's been inconsistent, and I think that it doesn't serve to be going live at different times every day. I think it maybe lessens the potential for impact, and it's also just good discipline for me. Here's the thing, I had to actually just start small. I had to just go live every day. Let me just go live, and then my goal for next year is, okay, now I wanna go live at the same day, same time, every day. And then we get to just, like, add to it. So, really, man, if we have barely even started on some of our goals and dreams, what's the first best step forward? And just get into the habit, establish rhythm, and then we can build on that. It takes, 30 to 60 days to build a habit. So, what I would say is do the audit. When have you been doing your best? What is the one thing, the next best step? And then habituate it and make it so constant, so consistent, it's even boring. And I've actually talked to myself and I know that next year I'm going to be threatened with boring. And I was talking to my partner today and told him I'm going to actually write something down that I can read every single morning that reminds me of what I'm committing to. I'm choosing this. I'm choosing a predictable life for 2026. And also why? Why am I choosing predictability? because my mission is so crystal clear. It's more clear than it ever has been, but it took time to set aside to gain the clarity on who I am, what's the passion there, and then the power. What's the powering habits that allow me to really activate and show up every single day with consistency, with a precision so that, man, the impact is undeniable. But it starts with me. And that's been the biggest thing, frankly. It might take a long time for my mission to see the light of day. I already am seeing some really beautiful and encouraging signs that keep me moving forward, and it's like gas in the tank, but it's me against me every time. It doesn't matter the external accolades, it doesn't matter all these vanity metrics. So there is something around sports psychology about just keeping the eye on the ball, keeping clear, crystal clear of what is my target, what's my aim, moving forward and not letting the external voices get in our way. Yesterday we talked about this. So if you want to rewind to yesterday's live, we really dove into who will you believe? Whose voice are you listening to? Is it your voice? Is it fear's voice, shame's voice, your colleague's voice, your boss's voice, your parents' voice, your ex-partner's voice? Who has access to your mind? That is such and probably one of the most important questions. Who is the source that is feeding you information about you and about the world? So just jumping back down to the chat, Danny, I hope that that was helpful. I'm just jumping into the chat again, just to catch up a little bit here. Uh, Robbie, this is real. I am live. Um, and I'm just going to go ahead and, sorry, I'm catching up on the chats. Steve, thank you. God bless you, sir. Daniel, thank you. I really appreciate you jumping in here. Robbie, I love that you said you're made new in Christ. I love that. There's something around the habits of Christ that we were studying leading into Christmas, where, man, it's really, really a beautiful thing. When we actually realize that God is in us in the most powerful, beautiful way, and we get to, guys, this is what's so insane. And I actually don't hear a lot of religious people talking about this. Jesus said, "It's better for me to go away, so that effectively each one of you can be like me." And so that's why these studying the habits of Christ was so important and is so important. Who who do we get to be? How do we get to live? What's the power that we've got access to? So yes, it's almost like a reclamation of the passion of, this is my soul's calling. This is why I'm here. But also it's a reclamation of the power that's been lying dormant that we didn't know about. We've been looking externally to everyone to come and solve our problems. And we didn't realize that we were the hero all along. It's so freaking cool. Ugh, and it's so not, I have a branding and marketing business. That's not what we encourage our clients to do. Don't put yourself as the hero, put the customer as the hero. But this flips it all on its head personally. You and I are the authors of our story in the most beautiful way, so long as, again, we're coming into the hierarchy of living in subservience, in obedience almost to our own ideal as informed by the divine, by God. Who do you say that I am? What am I to do? Who am I to be? And we have so much power and so much choice there. Um, okay, just jumping back here in the chats and then we'll keep going. All right, y'all, I really, really love this conversation, because looking back at 2025, it is so important that we really take time to analyze what worked for us. It's so easy. I forget, I think it was Jim Collins, his book, Good to Great. He talked about, effectively, a lot of businesses will stop doing what's working. And y'all, we do this for ourselves. We establish a life for ourselves, and then we love it, and then we change it. And it's like, why change and fix what's not broken? Add to it. There's when I love this. Okay. So talking about knowing, there's so much about coming to know who we are, coming to know ourselves, coming to know God, coming to know the world, where we actually have to do a lot of removing. It's like Michelangelo was asked, "How did you create David?" And he said, "I just removed everything that David was not." And then he arrived at David, this beautiful, uncanny sculpture of this beautiful man. And y'all, that's what we're doing here. We're removing what's excess. We're removing what needs to go, what is actually really damaging us. Um, Liz, I just saw you say, I was bullied by a sibling for so many years and finally had enough. Mm, I I really that is really, really, really painful. I was doing a coaching call with someone, and oh gosh, even now as I remember it, it just makes me so sad. She was talking about something really similar with her sibling, and she said, "Well, that's just the way it was." And I just looked at her, and I really encouraged her in that moment, just because that's the way it was, that does not mean that's the way it should have been. And it's actually really important that we do, as we are removing and eliminating mindsets, narratives, beliefs, behaviors, that we also recognize the time to grieve. It's really so incredibly sad. Some of the things that we've been through, the little T traumas actually need to be grieved in order for us to move through them, to be free from them. But if we don't ever go back and grieve, man, there's no way to be free. And so the grieving of the little T traumas, the big T traumas, like when my brother-in-law was killed, that's a big T trauma, and that gave me excuse to go to therapy. But all those little T moments matter just as much, because they actually can do just as much, if not more, psychological and emotional damage than the big T moments, because everyone's like, well, obviously you're going to be hurt by that. Obviously you're going to be sad. So yeah, I just really, I just wanted to kind of double click on that and say, I'm really sorry. Um, okay. Just going through some more of these notes. Um, oh, I think that this is a really, really beautiful question. How do you feel about giving people advice when you're so young? I, that's such a good question. And frankly, there's something about it that, mm, how do I want to answer this? I think every single one of us has a story to share and an experience to share. And I actually think that that is part of our responsibility as human beings, is to share our experience, to create, to create through word, to create through art, through music, through business, through whatever your mode and outlet of creation is. This is a way that I create. I create my own thoughts and my own processing, and this process of doing this show is a form of art for me. And man, it's more so sharing, I think, than advice giving. And, I will say that I think it's probably the most beautiful thing about redemption, that something that was broken or painful can actually be used for good in some way. And so I think we've seen people at 20 years old, 10 years old, 60 years old have an experience that frankly I've learned from. So in one sense, I actually think age is something that should really prompt us to be more humble. The older I get, the more I realize how much I don't know. And I learn a lot from my 11-year-old niece. Actually, just today, I'm so glad you asked this question, because just today, she and I have been working on her little business, and she's making it a nonprofit. It's called Caring Crafts and Cookies. And she wants to go to nursing homes and living centers and bring them crafts and cookies and sing for them and tell them about Jesus. And it's just like the most pure and precious thing. And we did that today for the first time. And I feel so inspired by her. I literally went to her school talent show a month ago, and she was so confident. She was up there singing Popular from the show Wicked with her best friend, and they made a mistake, and it was so I and she felt great. She kept going, performed awesome, never skipped a beat. And man, that was a moment for me where I looked in the mirror, talk about looking in the mirror, and I realized how much I just really have an ego. Like, man, if I messed up, even here in this show, there have been times where I trip over my words, or God only knows, a litany of things happen, but, like, I just was sitting there watching this 11-year-old niece of mine be so confident and not arrogant, but just really it's like she knows she's loved. And it doesn't matter what she does in terms of how she performs. She knows that she's good. She knows that she's worthy. She knows that she's loved. And so she's so secure in her identity. And so we can learn something from everyone so long as there's this verse that says, "Those who have ears to hear, let them hear." And I always want to approach life that way. I think the moment we start assigning judgment, man, it's damning for every single one of us, assigning judgment on age, demographics, whatever your reason for assigning judgment is, religion. I think that actually that's the moment that we begin to be separate from each other rather than identifying really that with Christ being in every single one of us. Man, if God is in every single one of us, each one of us has something secret and mysterious that I really believe only we know. And man, if we're not creating, we're actually going to prevent the world from being able to come to know what that is. And so when we're thinking about 2026 and am I going to do something hard? Sometimes sometimes it's actually coming face to face with the fact of am I willing to be seen? Am I going to be brave enough to be seen and be witnessed in the imperfection of creativity? In the vulnerability of creation, because creating, the very act of it is vulnerable because we don't have a finished product yet. We are creating. I don't know how the show's going to end. We're creating, you and I right now. The questions you're asking, what I'm saying back to you, every single part of this is real time creation. And I see a lot of times, people talk here in the chat. And just so you guys know, I've got two different YouTubes connected here, my personal one and then knowing. So I'll call people out in the chat who aren't here. I also have Instagram up and a few other channels. But what I will say is that in this process of going back and forth, we want real connection. And so people are like, is this another AI stream? Because we want real people. We want real connection. We want each other. And y'all, we are in this age of loneliness in a way that we've never experienced before. We experienced it in COVID to an extent, but especially with AI companions coming out right now, man, it's getting to be really serious. This epidemic of it's really like a crisis and it's so incredibly sad. And so I would love to charge each one of us, me included, this question of what are you doing that's hard? This question was sparked by a phone conversation I had earlier today because I really want to continue to lean into doing hard things. I have such an aversion to it in my nature. So sometimes we actually have to go against our nature and go against what feels most natural to us to hide or to shrink back. But man, when Christ is activated in us, we are not ones who shrink back and play small because we have again the power literally of God in us to come and spark and bring to life the passion that lies within us because we know who we are and we know what we're called to do. And so to Danny, your initial question earlier around like having these really big dreams, same. And so the way that I've really been able to honor my dreams is by dedicating time every single morning. And really, I call it vertical alignment. It's the time that I take to stop looking to the east and to the west, to the right and to the left, and point my ship, my compass, point it north to take the helm, to take the wheel and start orienting my day. But it's time and space every single morning. That's my sacred time, honestly, for me. And then that's what allows me to create. And so when it comes to our big goals and our big dreams, man, so much of this really relies on, okay, am I actually becoming the person? Who do I need to be in order to do what I want and that I'm called to do, that I was created to do? So, um, I hope that answered your question. But all right, y'all, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm just looking through a couple more of these questions. Um, yeah. I think I caught up on all the questions. I know that you guys are mentioning here a couple of times around like not seeing the same people in the chats. Again, the Knowing podcast I think is the handle on one YouTube channel, and I've got Christene Marie on another, so that's why you're not seeing the same people that I'm calling out. But, anyways, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I really encourage you. I'm taking more of a retreat this upcoming weekend after my family Christmas. I really, really encourage you to ask yourself, what do you want to do in 2026 that would make you proud of you? Because we only have one life and we're building our legacy one moment at a time, one day at a time. Our legacy that effectively we look back on at some point, we're building it right here, right now, every single moment. And so the question that we were asking and examining earlier around what do we want? What do we want in these categories of our life? Physically, what do we want? Emotionally, relationally, financially, professionally. What do we want to do? And who do we want to be? We need to address both layers to the question. So, y'all, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Super chat. I'm so glad that you joined. I couldn't agree more with Jesus saves. I love it. And also, this is where there's some cool elements here, and bear with me as I say this. I actually, he said it's better for me to go. And so, okay, are we activating Christ in us to the fullest extent and getting access to that power so that, man, we can talk about us living a life that we're proud of, so that we can be proud of the fact that God is in us, alive in us, and are we actually activating and harnessing that power and really making the impact that I know every single one of us can make and will make, because each one of us were made for a very specific and intentional purpose. So with that, thank you all so much for joining me tonight, and I will see you